It's not the first time that we heard 30, 40, 50% climate change. I even had to do 70% climate change in one of my jobs. Now in this tutorial, I'll be going through on how to get your climate change for your peak rainfall intensity, meaning that that is the climate change that you should be applying in your drainage simulation, and I will explain you why. Now, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing as I bring weekly tutorials on civil engineering topics. In addition, we have created a new website where you can join the forum and ask any questions, and other members can answer them for you, which are engineers from all around the globe. So without further ado, let's begin. So we're gonna start by going to the government websites and searching the Flood Risk Assessment's Climate Change Allowance Guidance, which was published in February 2016 and updated in 2020 of July. And we're gonna go all the way down to Table 2, which is our peak rainfall intensity allowance in small catchments, where less than 5 square kilometers, which works out 500 hectares. Or urban drainage catchments based on the 1961 to 1990 baseline. Now, I'm not pretty sure what the second one is, so if you know, please leave it in the comments below so we can share it with everyone. Now, we have the table and we have the columns for the years, and then we have two rows, the upper end and central. Now, if you remember from my previous tutorial in the climate change allowance for river intensity flows, if we go here and see that we have some definition. So essential infrastructure, use the upper end allowance, high vulnerable, use higher central, less vulnerable, use central and higher central allowances to assess the range of allowances. Now, what is less vulnerable and more vulnerable? Where basically it's the definition of what you're trying to build. So if you're building a warehouse, I think it's the less vulnerable, but if you're building a hotel, it's more vulnerable. So let's assume we're building a warehouse, so it's a less vulnerable. So we're gonna go for the, and it's in flood zone 1, which straight away goes to central, but let's say it's flood zone 2 or 3A. Basically it benefits from flood defenses. We use the central and we check higher central allowances. So basically what it's trying to tell us is use the central 20 and then check for 40. And if we look further down, design your drainage system to make sure there is no increase in rate of runoff discharge from the side for the upper end allowance. So basically what it's trying to tell us is use 20% and check that your discharge rate does not increase in 40. Now obviously that goes without saying, we should not have any flooding that cannot be contained on site, because as you're aware, for the 1 year our drainage system should come as okay, on the 30th year should be surcharged at maximum, and for the 100th year, if it floods, it should be contained within site. So basically you need to do your calculations, work out how much you can flood and be able to contain it within site. If you're not sure how much you're allowed to flood, then you should check the NPPF, National Policy Party Framework, I think. I'm not pretty sure about the abbreviation for that one. National Planning Policy Framework, yeah, that's the one. Now, with that being said, all you have to do is check what are you building, so you can find out what vulnerability category is, and then check your 20% and then check for 40% if there is an increase in discharge rate and if the flooding can be contained within site. Now, if you're doing a due diligence or a flood risk assessment, it's different, because if you're doing a due diligence, you have to put 40 just in case, because you're not running the drainage simulation, you're just running a storage estimate, which actually a storage estimate should be based on the 30 because you're allowed to flood in the 100. Now, for the flood risk assessment, you have to say that you've run at 20% and that you checked for 40%, that there is no significant flooding and the discharge rate does not increase. Now, what are the other cases? The other cases is if the SFRA states something different. For example, here we have the Milton Keynes Level 1 SFRA, and under the section climate change, it says global warming, blah, 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 ice is melting, polar bears are in danger. And then we go to table 4.4 and says recommended national precautionary sensitivity ranges for peak rainfall intensity, peak river flow, etc. So if we look at the peak rainfall intensity, we can see from 2055 to 2085 is 20%, but then from 2085 to 2115 is 30%. So does that mean that we're using 30% for this one? I'm not 100%, it doesn't say exactly, oh, use that one. And it says as part of the hydraulic modeling studies, the fluvial water course, and goes on and on and on talking about these ones. So basically the studies they've done for the Milton Keynes area, but it doesn't specify what we're gonna use. Now some SFRAs, for example the Northampton one, they ask you to do a 200 storm. So basically you have to attenuate for the 200 storm if you are in the Upper Nini catchment or any other upstream branches from a river name which I forgot. So my advice to you is to check your SFRA if it says anything peculiar. For example, Coventry Q-bar minus 20% betterment and the climate change 40%. It's like, that's absurd. But obviously they look at it from case to case. And then you go back to the flood risk assessment guidance for climate change, and you can read through it and understand pretty much everything. Because if you look at it, we have some climate changes here, but these are for the river flow allowances. So basically, if you're gonna model a river and allow for climate change so you can figure out the flood level, etc., then those are the climate change you should use. But when you're modeling your site, we don't have a river raining on our side. We have the rain raining on our side. So we should use the rainfall peak intensities allowance for climate change, which is 20%, and then we check for 40. So I hope you found this tutorial useful and you can use it next time when somebody tells you use 50% climate change. You can tell them on what basis, and if they say, oh, because that's what we want, then I think we should argue it, because I'm honestly a tiny bit tired of oversizing everything. Yes, conservatism is good and everything, but I believe we're engineers, we can design to the detail. Yes, climate change is looking into the crystal ball and it's like, oh, it's gonna rain tomorrow. In English weather, you can never predict it. But what you should take from this video is that now you should do the 20% and check for 40% unless the SFRA states differently from the local council that you're going for or the local lead flood authority. So hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have a different opinion, leave it in the comments below so we can discuss, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe.